All right, welcome to another episode of the Revenue Revolution podcast sponsored by Jointflows. Today we are joined by Scott Finden. Scott has been at Reachdesk for almost 4 years now, went from employee number 2 through from SDR, moving into sales, and now more recently has moved into the enterprise AE role as well. So great to have you here, Scott. I'm sure you've got a lot of nuggets of information you can share. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I appreciate you both having me on. Always love chatting to people in the industry and chatting about sales. But yeah, excited to be speaking. And yeah, I'm all good. Life's good. Summer vibes. Friday. Can't complain.
Good. Is there anything you want to add to your introduction? Anything that our listeners should know about Scott?
No, I think you nailed it. I think my journey in sales has been again probably quite a crazy one. Like joining very early in the company, I did about 7 months at another company, Botify, which is a French company. In SEO, I did sort of 7 months of BDR there. Then I was introduced to Alex Olive through somebody who I interviewed with before that role. I was doing well at this company. Things were going well, but then I got the chance to kind of meet a co-founder, which was something that was very appealing to me. The chance to maybe have some exposure to somebody who'd very much like been there and done it and got the t-shirt, and grow something from the ground up. And then, after a bit of careful thought, I kind of took the opportunity with both hands and kind of haven't looked back. So it's been a fun journey, and yeah, here I am.
Yeah, you've certainly ran with it. We've both kept a close eye on Reachdesk actually, as the founders are also the founders of the company we used to work for as well. So
yeah,
it's been interesting to watch, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot more about your journey now. I think a good starting point actually to move, which is quite topical, thinking about the climate today, is you'll move into an enterprise role as well. So it looks like you've been a top stellar performer across your career at Reachdesk and perhaps before that as well. What are the differences you're seeing moving into an enterprise sales role now versus the SMB space, and how are you trying to make those adjustments?
yeah, that's a good question. So I guess maybe a bit of a caveat is that Reachdesk have only relatively recently started to segment in terms of commercial, like SMB, mid-market, and then enterprise. So I've only been in enterprise for probably like a month and a half or 2 months, and so I've only had a limited like introduction into like specifically enterprise leads. But before that, I was kind of taking a mix of all of them. So in the prior 2 years to that, I moved into the AE role in January 2021. So up until the first couple of years was very much quite diverse. I could be speaking with a 50-person company, or FIS, like 40,000 person fintech, or automation anywhere, like big thousands of employees type company. So I had a good bit of exposure, which I think's kind of fared me pretty well. I think probably one thing I underestimated for a while was like actually tailoring my approach depending on who I was speaking with. Kind of just thought like, I'll just do my thing and like take people through a sales process, but I truly wasn't tailoring too much. Like the difference between, like I said, like a 50, 100 employee business up to one of the big boys. And yeah, so that's probably something I've probably become more aware of, is being a bit more patient. I'm not, I'm generally probably, I think historically I've probably been impatient, something I've been trying to work on a lot more recently in various ways. But like, I think having more patience in the sales process is definitely needed. Procurement cycles that take 6+ months, sometimes longer, that kind of stakeholder management piece, being able to keep like the conversation fresh and keep things like top of mind without it going stale, and not souring relationships by like pushing people too hard, or like getting upset when maybe timelines take longer than you might expect. So those are some of the main things I'm having to kind of like think about more and address more, and kind of be at peace with, knowing that there is going to be certain timelines and trajectories that just take a certain, time. I had good exposure. And, I managed to close a handful of, really big logos and big clients. So I think that was a good thing in terms of, having the small ones, having some medium. I was a big fan of the mid-market because it was like decent deal sizes. They had money. For a while, they were all growing very fast, but they didn't take ages to make decisions or go through procurement. I think patience is the main thing I'm really trying to adjust overall.
How do you do this, Scott? Because there's a mindset element to it, which is managing your own expectations, and then there's also a more tactical piece on, as you said, like staying relevant without being stalky and being awkward. Like, Have you found some tactics that work well and are scalable?
Yeah, I think it's like over time we've thought more about this internally. Recently we launched like an ROI calculator. So again, it's just like thinking about which phase we are at in the deal and like doing the thing that's most relevant. I think like selling as a team, I think is an important thing. So like keeping it fresh in the sense of like having different voices that come on. Again, I think that's probably something I took for granted a little. Like, I always used to get like my VP revenue on when I was ramping up. And I think just having that like second voice on a call, especially as you like make progress after the, second call, after the scoping phase, getting different people involved. I think that always helps because they always add a different idea, a different angle to like the play. And I think that really helps keep things fresh. And I attended an event this week with A's of London, and like one of the A's there was saying that he like sells, took selling as a team to like a real extreme in this sense where he'd have his head of engineering messaging their head of engineering, his VP engineering messaging their CTO. He had like two different CEOs, and one was more introvert, one was more extrovert. So then depending on the personality match up with their CEO, he would like pick one or the other. And he referred to it as like man marking, like an organization. So, and that's one thing I think that, that was, pretty insightful for me to hear like his take on that. So that's something I'm starting to think more about now is like, how can I be more strategic? Aligning different teams, whether it's CS, we've got like this internal ABX team, which are like an ABM style, like consultative type thing where we can like dive into do messaging. Then we have like product, obviously engineering. So trying to think a bit more strategically around like, who can I lean on? Who can be a dedicated resource? So when they've got time in their calendar, they're open to me like sticking something on. So I think those are one of the main things. But yeah, it can be difficult because I think it's something I've always avoided. Even when I was at SDI, I was like bubbling up in your inbox, floating this in, checking in. Like that's something I've always avoided. So I think just adding value at every step, whether it's something simple like content, relevant content. But yeah, I think the more people you have involved and the more like unique or diverse ways you can add value, that's something I think helps because then every interaction is valuable and like worthwhile for the prospect.
Yeah. I think you made some interesting points there. What we're finding is that multi-threading as early as possible within the sales cycle is great. So where you've got, your head of engineering speaking to their head of engineering, the exec alignment piece is key. What we're seeing is that I know you've obviously worked on different types of deals, SMB, enterprise, and so forth as well. And, you mentioned about SMB. One thing you liked about it was that the cycles weren't as long. And obviously what the data is telling us now is that SMB sales cycles are becoming as long as enterprise sales cycles used to be, and enterprise sales cycles are becoming even longer as well. So how are you managing that process from in terms of, what another thing you said earlier on was making sure it doesn't go stale, which I think is key in a long sale process. So how are you ensuring that's happening and how are you managing the timelines?
I think that's probably one of the main things I'm struggling with right now. If I'm speaking candidly, like maintaining momentum was something I felt like my approach to sales was always just like be quite high velocity, like, don't rush things too much, but like once I've established some value and a good champion and, there's a clear use case, really kind of like being quite punchy with the timelines to like get people through to proposal relatively quickly, pushing for things like the next day or, this week, like not waiting for like week or 2 weeks kind of thing. And that was generally quite, it was a kind of a formula that worked really well for a while. And I was able to like, strike quite a sweet balance between, like I said, that average order value and the velocity. Both were kind of like, really, really strong. But then, now that's one of the main things I'm struggling with is actually that momentum piece. I think one thing I did at the start of this year was kind of like push deals too much. And because we had a bit of a weaker pipeline, which I think is not uncommon. And so with the pipeline I did have, I was kind of thinking like, I just need to get all these deals into proposal. And if I get enough through, then something's going to stick. And I probably ended up rushing too many of them. And I had like gaps in medpick and I wasn't solidifying compelling events properly. And I wasn't multi-threading, relying on like even like one person in some situations, which I like, a year ago was just like unheard of. So that's something I'm really trying to address now is trying to find the way to do that in this day and age. So that's why I went to this A's London event this week, because it was all about maintaining momentum. and there was some really interesting takeaways. And one was definitely that multi-threading piece, but loads to do, I think, with like discovery. I think, I think you can always tie everything back to the discovery, really, can't you? So I think just being that bit more thorough, that bit more diligent, and being a bit more like cutthroat in terms of like, is this just a conversation? Or is this just a coach? Do I need to treat it as such and kind of like qualify out or deprioritize it or insist that we have like more people involved at the next step? Or like, if this is a champion, if this is a real op, like, how do I really solidify this up with a solid time, with a solid compelling event, with a solid timeline and implications if they don't act now, or, specific calendar based like events that they need something in place by, and really like just having those like rock solid basically. So those are the main things I'm focusing on. But yeah, if I'm honest, it's definitely work in progress because I have not speak, and again, at this event I keep referring to, I was kind of weirdly pleasantly surprised to hear everybody was in the same boat. Like I was kind of thinking, oh, like people from Zoom Info or people from like whatever, like, I don't want to name too many companies, but there was people from every industry, like in sales enablement, data, like, fintechs, HR tech, everyone was in the same boat. Like, yeah, all my deals are just getting pushed out right now. Even the people who finished in the top 10 in like 100 over 100 last year, like top reps in the country, pretty much struggling with the same thing. So work in progress.
Yeah. And the way you speak is really impressive, Scott. Like you're very mature about the methodologies, your gaps, what you need to work on, what you think you're doing well. What's the right mindset to have a career like yours, where every 6 months, every 9 months, every year you move up a level and you keep on delivering at every single level you've reached?
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. First, that was very flattering.
You're on our top priority hiring list, just so you know.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, I'm pretty stuck at Reachdesk. People have every now and again, but I don't know, I'm pretty committed at this point. So, yeah, but I appreciate that. But yeah, I think it's a combination of obviously like luck. You can't underestimate that. Like, there's no point like trying to take all the credit. Like, I got very fortunate in the fact that I met Alex and was able to like kind of resonate him, and the fact that he was able to like select me, and the point I was at my career, it kind of was right, and I was young enough where I really wanted to take quite a big chance, because if it was a fairly like large like risk joining Reachdesk, when it was like 2 people in a cafe pretending to have a company, is how we often refer to it. So yeah, a big element of luck for sure. Been surrounded by amazing people. I basically got like hand taught by Alex Ollie for the first 6 months. So like between September 2019 when I joined and then COVID, sat opposite the 2 co-founders like on a day-to-day basis. So learning off their like mindset, how dedicated they were, how they applied themselves, everything that they knew about the business. You guys know Milan as well. So like, very switched on people. So that was a huge element of it. And I was very fortunate in that, like, that was kind of like, a bit of a crash course almost in Alex is so value led. He's always been, he always said that we were born account based. So there was never like, oh, here's a list of like 100 companies, go cold call them. We were handcrafting the ICP. We were handcrafting which accounts we went after. So that was something that was fully breathed into me from there. So I think taking a very like methodical and like kind of careful approach to who I'm targeting, how I target them, how I message them. And then Ben Smith as well, with huge influence on me. So he's now international BD director. He's like to this day, the best BD I've ever seen. And I happen to be, he was the first employee. So again, having somebody opposite me on the desk who was, up in the bar every week, having 3 to 5 meetings booked in, and then would go book in 2 to 3 more, like, that would sit that week, that was the bar. And every time he was booking things in, we had a really kind of like cooperative and like collaborative relationship where I was like, how did you do that? And I remember Alex Ollie saying once, like, oh, I love how you sort of say like, how do you do that? But not like, how did you do that, you bastard? But like, how did you do that? Like, so I can learn, it wasn't like an envious sense of like, how are you doing that? It's like, I really want to learn. So then every time either of us was booking in a meeting, it'd be like, we'd be looking at the messaging the phrasing we used, and over time we just kind of like learned from our mistakes and, trial and error almost a little bit, to the point where, yeah, we just had a pretty solid formula of like how to, build excitement, drive value. And then I think it's just a knock on from there. And then maybe one final thing I would add that just comes to mind is just being pretty driven and competitive. Like, I really want this. And, you know, so I could have had that exposure and that experience, but just be like, not asked about it. And maybe I wouldn't have been able to kick on, but it's something that, yeah, I'm really driven by, really excited by, you know, I want to have a great career, and I'm, pretty damn competitive. So if there's other people in the team that are like doing well, like, you know, I have to be doing at least as good as them. So that pushes me a lot. So yeah, various factors really.
Yeah, I think you've said some great things there. You know, you only know what you know. And so having great mentors in place, like Alex, like Milan, for example, is really good. That ability to continually learn and drive yourself forward is important as well. You know, there's a big piece around self-awareness that allows you to do that. What are some of the ways in which you continue to learn outside of the mentorship or guidance that you get internally within Reachdesk?
Outside of Reachdesk, I mean, I listen to a lot of books, but you know, I had listened to the odd sales book, to be fair. I would say that's probably a big source of. I was going to start talking about stuff inside Reachdesk, but you did say specifically out. So,
even inside, actually, just outside of mentorship, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things come to mind. So, I mean, I kind of quite a consistent Audible like book consumer. So, and it's not just like Harry Potter and stuff like that. You know, most of them are like productivity or like Atomic Habits, Never Split the Difference, How to Influence and Influence People, Challenge Yourself. You know, I've got a little notebook up here actually. You know, where I've kind of gone through and taken 2 pages of notes on all the books I've listened to by like reading back through book summaries and stuff like that. And I feel like a lot of that has really helped me. You know, I remember like when I first listened to like How to Win Friends and Influence People back in the early days of Reachdesk, and I was like, this is like life changing. Like this, because that book is like a real step-by-step guide basically on like how to like win friends. It says on the tin, but like how to truly communicate with people who you don't know in a way that you can get them to do stuff. It was, you know, so like stuff like that, and you know, Atomic Habits to do with like productivity and habit stacking and stuff like that. So that's a big part of, I think, and I don't know that many people that do that kind of level of stuff, and I definitely don't know anybody that like takes notes on it, and I really do try and like digest it. I don't know if you know Misha actually, maybe from he was ex Sales Loft. I remember I've got a lot of tips, and he's an avid like book consumer. So and maybe I got that from people like him, because whenever they do like the top 100 A's of like, I always add everybody on LinkedIn, and I say, hey, like, you know, I'm open to, and I always message them saying, you know, I do this consistently every 6 months whenever they release that with like Wiser, and I just say, hey, have you got any advice, like what's been working for you this year? So I'm quite proactive, I think, in like seeking out, you know, what top performers are doing, like making sure I'm at least connected with them on LinkedIn so I can just see how they're operating, but then you know, proactively message them and saying like, hey, like what's working. And obviously, you know, half of them won't reply, but half of them do. So just trying to take little tips like that. But the other thing that comes to mind as well is like something I've always done internally. I think like peer-to-peer learning is like critical, and that's been one of the biggest value adds for me. Something I'd done back in the BDR team, and I still do now in the AE team in the same way, is weekly like hour-long sessions with everybody in the team. And as a BDR, it was often based around objection handling, and just each session, what's the key objection we're facing this week, and you know, over time sort of compiling a list of like the key ones. But I'm going into a meeting, we work with a competitor, we haven't got the budget, whatever. And then, you know, really formulating and discussing kind of in an open, like no wrong answers style environment, like what do you see work? Like, what, you know, when you've had this before, what's worked, and getting everybody to like contribute, and like calling on people who aren't involved and saying like, what are your thoughts on this? And then just like kind of boiling it all down, and then getting to the point where you've got a nice condensed 1 or 2 ideas and like how best to handle a certain objection. And now we do it in the AE team with stuff that we're struggling with AEs, or just like the process. So like discoveries, multi-threading, you know, negotiations, like preparing during calls or preparing before calls, pipeline management. So again, we'll do like an hour-long session each week where we all just discuss like a specific like hot topic that's like relevant to the, you know, people's current, you know, scenario. So that's something. And, you know, we just got Word docs, and they're now like, you know, dozens of pages, basically just notes. That's something I think has been really helpful as well. So yeah,
no, that's a great answer. I think you hit some key points there. You know, the self-development piece, listening to podcasts, reading books, the sharing and reapplying internally as well, which is key in order to understand what's working and driving forward in a cohesive manner. I think there's, you know, I've come across 2 different types of people in my career. Some of the people who take this knowledge and don't actually end up doing anything with it. You know, you can read 100 books, but if you don't take action, it doesn't mean anything. And then there's the other half, which are people who absorb all this information and take action. What's the difference, or how is it that you adjust mentally to be able to execute against what you're absorbing from an information point of view?
I think like reflecting on it and like kind of, you know, I don't just consume these books like just for the sake of it. Like when I'm listening to them, I'm like thinking about how it applies to like my life. Obviously, it can be wider life, right? It's not always just like work related. So yeah, I think, I don't know, just like actually being reflective. I think being self-aware, and like understanding that you're not the finished article. Like one thing, James, who we touched on before, who's our VP revenue, who's recently gone to CS, like he often refers to me as like, you know, one of the most coachable people he's worked with, which kind of his words are very kind of, so I feel kind of silly for like mentioning that, like a bit precocious, but I think that's one thing I've kind of got is like the ability to know like, hey, like I'm not the finished article, and I want to get better, and I know I can get better. And like, even though like, yeah, it was a great BDR, or yeah, I had like a good quarter as an AE, like it's like, you know, I know I need to get better. So I think having that initial mindset, because I think complacency is like one of the main things you see set in with AEs, because like the base salary can be quite good, because it, you know, once you've had a couple good logos under your belt, you can probably blag an interview and get a job at somewhere half decent and spend a year there and then move on. Like that seems to be the thing that some AEs would do. And they're more than happy to do that. And it's like, yeah, I don't know, that just doesn't that doesn't sit with me, and that's not a career I aspire to. So it's like, I know that I need to just like continuously get better. So I think that being the framework at which you approach everything, including things like digesting content, reading books, doing those like open forum like style sessions, attending events, whatever, you know, you're approaching each of those things with the mindset of like, where can I add value to, or where's my gap, like whatever. So yeah, I think it's that self-awareness and that kind of like, you know, ability and maybe sometimes courage to admit that you're not that the finished article or like the perfect salesperson or whatever. So yeah.
Scott, you've got very much, I'm going to give you more compliments, but you've got very much of an elite performer mindset, right? And you could do well in any industry with this mindset, because you've got the ability to understand where you stand, what's left to discover. You put yourself out, like you learn things you don't know about, you take on notes, you know, you apply those things. What I've seen is usually this mindset can also lead to be a little bit consumed outside of work sometimes, just because you're so like focused on the goal, like you can't forget about personal balance and all of that. Have you got any tactics or things you do outside of work to kind of leave work behind and then refresh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good question, isn't it? Yeah, I agree that there's definitely times where I've like kind of got caught up in things, and I don't know, but I think overall I think I manage it pretty well. I like I don't know, I think like generally I'm a pretty laid back kind of person. I'm pretty easygoing. Like it's not my personality to be like particularly controlling or like, I don't know, obsessive over things as such. So like I do have quite a natural like personality that maybe just like go with the flow and like kind of take things easy, which marries well with quite nicely with the competitiveness that, you know, I don't get too caught up in things. But not to say that there has been times where, you know, you'll spend an evening like thinking about a deal, or like I remember one time I lost a deal to a competitor when I was in Portugal, when I was on the beach, and I was in the taxi on the way to the beach, and I like saw the email, and I like spent the whole day just fuming. Like I couldn't even relax. I was just like just mad, like properly fuming that I'd lost this deal, which I knew I shouldn't have. But yeah, the tactics, I don't know, like having great people around you. Like I'm married, I've got like an amazing wife, and, you know, we're very like in sync with each other and always very supportive, and like, you know, doesn't take long to just literally like chill and have a meal or whatever, and very quickly like switch off. So I think having a great like partner in life is like a massive thing. And then obviously like having friends around you. I'm very active, so like I cycle a lot, I play football every week, like go to the gym a couple times a week or so. So I think that is a massive outlet as well, like burning off some steam, like physically getting out of your system, like go for it, like, you know, again, like sometimes I get caught up and then I'm like, I'm going to go for a run at lunchtime or whatever. So that kind of thing I think helps. Meditating is a big one. Like I've used Headspace for like 2.5 years now, and I've, I think I've meditated like nearly 2,000 minutes. It counts it in. I don't know how many that is an hour. I think it's like 25, 30 hours. So that's, something that I think helps a lot, like having mindfulness, like using mindfulness techniques, breathing techniques.
Yeah.
All those things I think are key tools. So yeah.
Amazing. And perhaps one last question from me, and then I can hand the mic over back to Hitesh. But what do you do in your first few weeks as a new starter in a new role? Like, what's the checklist to be successful?
It's been a while since I've been in brand, but I guess as an A, I have been in new roles. I think for me, one of the main things is always connect with the high performers. Like that for me is like probably the most obvious one. I remember I did it at Botify. I just looked at the leaderboard. Okay, cool. Who are the top 5 BDRs? Sweet. 30 minutes in their calendar like this week. What are you doing? Tell me everything. What's your process? How does it work? How do you schedule your time? What kind of messaging do you use? So just really like, I don't think sales is particularly like, it's not rocket science really. At the end of the day, it's a handful of, skills that you have to master. If it's a BDR, it's cold calling, email, maybe LinkedIn, and like account mapping. Like you could literally boil it down to those 4 things. And if you did nothing else and you did them really well, you would be a great BDR. Same with AEs, it's probably a bit more multifaceted. You could probably boil it down to maybe 8 to 10 key things, but it's just about, if I'm doing a role, be a sponge around the people who are doing it well already, and like, put your own spin on it. Of course, don't just like try and be them, but really truly understand how they're operating, how their brain works, how they're structuring their time, what they feel that their key like factors towards success have been, and just applying as many of them as you can on a day-to-day basis, and just control the things you can control.
Yeah, good answer. One of the things I'm going to speak about is, and I think is very relevant, is the move from SDR to AE. So, I'd say a high percentage of people who are SDRs, they have an ambition to move into an AE role. And often it can go one of 2 ways. You might be the top performing SDR, therefore you are now an AE. Doesn't necessarily translate well. It could work, but it might not work because the ability to succeed in one role doesn't necessarily translate to succeeding in the other role. What are some of the key learnings that you experienced in making that move that you would be able to advise other people who are looking to make that move on, to make that transition as easy as possible?
Yeah, I found it a pretty tough transition. It definitely wasn't easy, and it probably took longer than I would have in my head at the beginning liked it to have taken. For me, it took probably a year to like fully ramp as an AE, I would say, to the point where I actually felt like I knew what I was doing and I felt confident in the role. I remember there was times early in the role where I even felt like, this is a great op. Like it'd be better if it was with one of the other AEs almost, and that was like a feeling I really wasn't used to. But one of the main things that I underestimated going into it was the time scale, in terms of like when you're a BDR, you might be a bit behind target. If you like bang out a bunch of tasks for like 2 days, you bust your ass and you just like hammer out a ton of activity. 2 days later, you're back on, you could book 3-4 meetings, you're back on track, like life's good again. Yeah. And that short-term time horizon is, something that enables you to like get over the bad times quite quickly. You can turn around a bad month, very easily. Whereas as an AE, if you're behind target, which as a new AE, you're very likely to be, you can't change that for a month or 2 months or sometimes longer. Like, you have to sit there in the mud and realize, I'm not going to hit my quarterly number for like 2 months just because you're like so far off pace and you haven't got the pipeline coverage. And that was a really difficult thing because I was so used to just being able to be like, cool, bang, 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 I'm back on track again. Whereas now I'm having to sit with it. So that's something I've said to all the people that have joined the AE team is like, that's something to be aware of, is like, don't underestimate that. You're going to have to be used to like working for like weeks at a time, knowing that you're like off the pace. And that for me wasn't an easy thing to adjust to. But yeah, one of the main things that is like a practical advice that I felt really made a difference is close lost reviews. So I every quarter I did a sort of detailed breakdown of all the deals that had gone to close lost. I did also do the close won deals, but I didn't spend too much time thinking about those. But I literally broke it down in terms of how the meeting was booked in, how many people were involved in the deal, how many calls I had, what was the medpick score, how many, was it multi-threaded, whatever, maybe a couple other elements I might have missed, but really just trying to take the bias out of it, because I think when you run the deals in your head, you think like, oh yeah, this is a great deal, got a great relationship, they're saying good things, whatever. But when you strip all that like out of it and you look at the skeleton of the op and you think, what is this actually made out of? And then you realize like, oh, I was only speaking to one person. Or like, oh, like medpick was like so low, like I literally was missing like half of the things. I hadn't asked any of those like decision-based questions or whatever. And like upon that reflection, and then doing it over the scale of a whole quarter where you might have, dozens of ops, whatever, however many it is. And then trying to identify trends. So then I can be like, cool, like those 4 deals, like I want to highlight those. Like those are the ones I really felt like I was going to win and I didn't. And then I've noticed that in like all 3 of them, like this was missing or whatever. And so I did that really consistently in the first year, something that I keep saying to myself, I want to like get back up to, because it did kind of take like a whole day to do a quarter's worth of like deal reviews properly. But that was something that really helped you ramp up, because I was making loads of schoolboy errors, because that's what you do when you're new in anything. And so I was able to identify, cool, like those are those schoolboy errors, and here are the trends. And then now, cool, here's the implementation plan of what I'm going to do to stop those happening moving forward. So yeah, doing a close loss deal review as often as you can, maybe monthly, maybe quarterly, especially when you're ramping, is so critical, because the best way you can get consistency in your performance is like stop making simple errors. You're always going to get tough deals where you might lose it to a close thing, but if you're just doing all the basics really well, you're going to give yourself a good chance. So that was something I did that really helped.
Yeah, deal forensic is really powerful. I've got a last question, and then we can wrap up. We spoke about having good mentors, and the likes of Alex Solly is probably top 1% in the industry, and like extremely knowledgeable, very credible. But what does it take to be a good mentee? Like, being mentored efficiently also requires skills. I've had some people I was mentoring, and it was slightly painful sometimes. How do you make it easy to be taught?
I think, it kind of ties in with the previous point of sort of like understand that you're not the finished article is definitely a big part of it. I think just being open-minded, not trying to excuse yourself. Like, I think something that, to your point, when you give someone advice, sometimes I'll have a new BDR on the team and I'll say, hey, like, are you open to me giving you a little bit of feedback? I'm really keen on making sure that people share with me and I share with them, like what I feel like we could do better, with the aim of us obviously providing a better like experience moving forward and helping us improve. I just try and frame it in that way, and people usually say yes. And then sometimes you'll be like, hey, I noticed this happened, like maybe we could have tried that. And then people will try and excuse it and be like, oh yeah, but blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, but, and it's like, when someone's giving you a feedback as a mentor, someone who knows what good looks like, someone who's been there and done it, whatever, like don't try and then justify why you did the thing that they're trying to like advise you against. That for me is probably one of the main things I notice. And like when somebody like gives that feedback or that pushback almost, when you give them a bit of advice, it really kind of like is a bit of a like question mark in my head. I'm like, does this person actually want to improve? Is this person actually listening to what I'm trying to say to them? Do they care? Do they agree? Like, whatever. Even if you don't agree, it's just like, don't try and justify the advice that you've been given. So that's one of the main things for me. I think just being open-minded to it, seeking it out, asking what could I have done better is always a big one. In the early days of Reachdesk, like we would do these demos, and this is when it was so scrappy, like right in the early days. Me and Ben, who was like the first AE, also another Ben, we would sometimes spend 45 minutes to an hour dissecting the call immediately after. So like the prospect would hop off, and then we'd sit there and I'd be like, oh, hey, have you got time for some feedback? And he would say the same to me. And we'd pretty much grill each other. Like and sometimes it would like, sometimes it would get a little bit like heated almost, of just like, yeah, like this is what we should have done, blah, blah, blah. I felt like, but like we was always in a good spirit of like, I want to hear what you've got to say. And like, and then, a few months later, like, and he ended up being, he hit his number, like, 2 years running, like every quarter. So, and likewise me as a BDR managed to do really well. So yeah, I think seeking it out, being open-minded to it, and not trying to justify the bad behaviors or whatever is being corrected.
That's some great advice. We've got one final question, Scott, which we ask everybody. What is your favorite memory in your career to date?
I was thinking about this the other day. And this is one memory that really sticks out to me. And it was when I was a BDR, and I managed to book 10 meetings in a week. And it was like during COVID, and it was kind of in that like kind of summer period, when we'd all been stuck in COVID for a while, and it was really like a big initial shock. And I was trying to push for like senior BDR and stuff. And I think at the time our target was like 15 a month. But yeah, I just worked from home and managed to book like 10 meetings in 1 week. And I just remember just feeling like just pure elation, like absolutely. But I was living with my parents because it was like during COVID, so we'd all gone like home. And I was just like playing music like so loud at lunchtime when I like put the 10th one in, and I just couldn't believe what I'd done. And yeah, just that feeling of like pure elation. Like, and I used to get that feeling. I still get that feeling now. You know, whenever anything goes well in sales, I think that's part of why we always do it. You know, but being a BDR, something about just booking a meeting in, it just like the feeling of like the rush, like adrenaline, just like pride and just like excitement, you're just like buzzing. So to like, that was really kind of like the pinnacle of it. It was just like getting so many, and yeah, just that feeling just sticks with you, you know? So yeah, there's been loads of wins, but for some reason that one just really stands out.
We're all adrenaline junkies out here. Makes sense. Well,
Yeah.
look, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for giving us the time. This has been the Revenue Revolution podcast sponsored by Jointflows. Until next time, thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Cheers. Appreciate it.